Hey, Soul Recovery community, it's Rev Rachel, and I am just giving you that reminder to join me on Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, Monday, for our monthly free Soul Recovery support group on Zoom. This is open and available to everyone. We come here together to share our soul recovery journey. I will speak on some soul recovery inspiration, and then we'll meet into small groups. If you've registered in the past, be on the lookout for that reminder email. And if you haven't registered, just jump on the website, recoveryoursoul.net, and I hope to see you there. In today's episode, we're diving into the emotion that many of us carry quietly, resentment. Whether it's from a relationship, a betrayal, or just feeling like life hasn't treated us fairly, resentment can keep us stuck in pain long after the moment has actually passed. But there is another way. In soul recovery, we learn how to turn the attention to ourselves, to bring compassion to the places that still hurt, and to gently release what no longer serves us. This episode is an invitation to let go, not for them, but for you, to open our hearts and be willing to be free. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Recover Your Soul podcast, a spiritual path to a happy and healthy life. My name is Reverend Rachel Harrison. I started Recover Your Soul after having profound changes in my life from my recovery of alcoholism, codependency, and control addiction. I was guided to share the tools and principles of spirituality and soul recovery to help others transform their lives as mine was transformed. For us to overcome external circumstances, we need to turn the attention to ourselves, focusing on our inner change and healing. Positive results in our lives will follow. Welcome to the Recover Your Soul podcast. I'm Rev Rachel, and I'm so glad that you're here joining me not only for this podcast, but being part of this really incredible community. We are indeed stepping onto a spiritual path to find a happy and healthy life, one that we get to choose for ourselves. We're learning how to take our power back, let go of control, and to come with compassion and grace in all aspects of our lives. But learning that we get to choose to be okay, even if the people and circumstances around us don't feel okay. And that isn't always easy, but it is this opportunity that we have to choose what we need and want in our own lives. And the topic that I wanted to talk about today is resentment. This is something that I've talked about in other podcasts in a variety of ways, but I don't know if I've done an entire podcast that's specifically on resentment in the way that I've been wanting to share it with you. Resentment is a word that's kicked around a lot, but it's that sticky heaviness that we carry without even realizing it. It's the way that we think that someone wronged us. It's the replay that we have, the tape that plays over and over again that says I was wronged or it's not fair. And you know what? It might have not been fair. And you might have been wronged, and someone may have harmed you in your heart. But we choose to hold on to that sticky emotion, and that's the part that we want to use the soul recovery process to release. I did a little research in preparation for today's topic because I wanted to have more clarity on giving you some real tools and information. And I did some research on different definitions of resentment using psychology, metaphysics, and soul recovery. From a psychological view, resentment is a chronic form of anger or bitterness, often rooted in perceived injustice, unmet expectations, betrayal, or unprocessed grief. And again, this is real. This is how you experienced something in your life. So it's the bitterness, the anger, the unmet needs, right? Like this is so real. These are the things that happen in our relationships. It's not that they didn't happen. They absolutely happened. And then from a metaphysical lens, resentment is an energetic stagnation, a vibration held in the body and mind that ties us to the past and blocks our connection to our true self and source and the ability to be present here now and not be tied energetically to this past energy. And then from the soul recovery perspective, soul recovery shares that everything that's going on with us can be a tool to be used to learn more about ourselves. So resentment can be a signpost. It shows us where we're still trying to control something outside of ourselves, where we're withholding compassion from others or with ourselves. And so this idea that everything that's happening in our life gives us a chance to understand ourselves more and to deeply, deeply, deeply connect to the healing that is way beyond our intellectual mind and into our soul's being. And resentment has a cost. It absolutely has a cost, right? So the cost of holding it from a psychological perspective is that studies show that resentment contributes to chronic stress, depression, substance use, relationship dysfunction, and even physical illness such as heart disease, lowered immunity. There is a physical way that resentment can harm you. And stress, chronic stress, is one of those things that makes it so that a part of your brain is turned on and it's keeping you from being able to access your higher processing brain. So we're really seeing that resentment can keep us locked in our fight or flight mindset, right? It's an actual way that our brains work. And I've often said that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting another person to die. This is a quote from 12-Step that I've said time and time again. It is fascinating how holding on to resentment, being upset, pissed, irritated, bitter, angry at somebody else, and we are holding on to it. And then we feel like it's doing something, but it's really, it's really harming us when we want it to be about the other person. And in soul recovery, what we talk about is that resentment keeps your energy entangled with people and situations that we need to release. And it's a form of self-abandonment. And that's a pretty profound thing to really realize, that you're losing yourself when you are resenting somebody else. So we're going to look at what resentment really is, why we cling on to so tightly, and how we can use soul recovery to release it and take our power back. You know, resentment's often an emotion that's covering another emotion. It can feel like anger. It can be under the surface, but it's really often grief, betrayal, and abandonment and hurt. And it comes when we feel unseen and disrespected and dismissed. And these are real situations that happen in our life. And when we come from this place where we recognize that life is complicated and we begin to really touch in with how we've been showing up, and we're taking our power back by recognizing that we can be responsible. This is step one in soul recovery, is the ready for awakening. It's seeing that you get to recognize that the way that your life is showing up for you is partially because of the way you're choosing to see it. And the way you're choosing to see it comes from these parts of you that are in your subconscious, these repetitive patterns and beliefs and stories that, of course, you have been living through because they were given to you as a child. We grew them even more in our adulthood, and now they've gotten even more intense. And this part of us that is continually trying to make other people fit into the mold of what we need, what we expect, what we want, and they're in their own experience bumping up against their own stuff. And every time that we have that unmet, unseen feeling, it is touching in on some really base core wounds. And of course they are. So that's the part about the soul recovery process, is being so gentle and compassionate to yourself. Really allowing yourself to recognize that we're seeing it in a new way. We're witnessing it in a new way. We're awakening to it. Our consciousness is becoming more aligned with recognizing that, of course, we wish that it was different, or we wish that it was not as painful. I've had a lot of resentments in my life that I've been working on. And what I wanted to share today in my personal story is around friendships. And it's been a journey for me in friendships. And I recognize that those friendship journeys have played out in my marriage as well, in my ability to be connected, to be loved, to accept love, to give love. And I've talked a lot about Rich over a variety of episodes over the seasons, but I find that the friendship piece is something that I come back to time and time again, and where resentment has really come up and raised its head in a way that's kept me from deeper connections with people. When I reflect on how resentment has worked in my life, the word resentment, It's the place where I am repeating the story from my side and I'm getting really, really caught up in my point of view and my side. For those of you who've been listening to the podcast for a long time and you hear some of the repeated stories, I apologize because they're the only stories I have because this is me. And my core wounds are the same core wounds that I've had since I was a little girl. But I've found that I've always had a couple different patterns of relationships in my life. One is that I generally have a best friend. I usually have one person who I feel finally safe with and really put all my energy into that one person. And being an only child, maybe this is just a product of what it's like as an only child, that it feels safer to be in just one relationship. But if I look at my history of relationships, I've had a best friend that then it either completely fell apart with some sort of a situation, or it just slowly started to fizzle and we began to have different interests, or whatever it was that had pulled us together in the first place has changed. And those relationships tend to kind of really fall away. And then I've had relationships where it feels like there's some sort of karmic connection with them, that there's some real pull for us to have a friendship. And it isn't that best friend, but it's an important friend. And then there is something that happens that really is a betrayal and really hurts. And those ones have been the resentments that I've been curious about in myself. And then my third type of relationship that I recognize that I've had in my life is I generally have found somebody who is an adversary. And that has been a very humbling realization to recognize that in almost all of my work environments or a lot of my relationships, that there's somebody in the friend group or some situation where that person in my mind is someone that I'm on competition with or somebody that doesn't feel safe with, and that I'm creating a resentment as them as an adversary. But generally, those people didn't start out as an adversary. Generally, those people did something to me that I perceived as being an attack. And then through that attack, I put up a very distinct wall. And then my defense mechanism, which is self-righteousness and judging, came up strong to protect myself. And I created a resentment. So if I look at these three sort of styles of friendships where there's somebody who you put all your trust into, you feel like they get you, that you can do everything together. And then there's some sort of betrayal, right? So I've had a variety of those in these best friend relationships. One was a friend that sometimes we make these friends because they live in close proximity and you end up spending a whole bunch of time together. And she was a woman that lived down the street, and she's a lesbian and was in a relationship when we first met that broke up. And we had some connection over the fact that she was in this breakup, and I provided her some support. And she just lived down the street, and she was so funny and so fun, and didn't have kids. And so she was at a place in her life where whatever was going on in my life with my kids, she just participated and jumped in with. And we literally just laughed and had like the best time. And I so enjoyed this relationship and friendship with her. And we just really gelled and had so much relaxed fun together. And then at some point, she started dating somebody who was jealous of our relationship, and rightfully so. It's kind of like in a male or female relationship, if it had been the opposite, right? If it had been a guy who had a best friend who was a girl, then that girlfriend might have been jealous. It's very normal to have jealousy. And in the end, this new relationship that she was in, that person gave her an ultimatum and said, ultimately, if you want to date me, you have to end this relationship with Rachel. It doesn't feel safe or comfortable to me. And I felt really, really, really devastated by this situation, because it took me a while to realize why. Because I just felt really like left. I felt really abandoned because it basically was cut immediately. And I think the thing about resentment is I created a whole story around being wronged. And this is the part that I really want to talk about because it feels that way. It feels like you were wronged. And I would tell everybody about how I felt wronged. And I would share with everybody like how unfair it was because it felt unfair to me. And it isn't about the fact that you can't share these experiences with people and be able to express how it's hurting you. Resentment means that you're putting the blame on them. The storyline is they did this to me, that this wasn't fair. How dare they do this to me? That's the storyline. That's where the resentment is, you taking the poison and thinking it's going to hurt them when really you're the one who's feeding the story and going back and back and back and back again. They did this to me. They did this to me. If you pull out with just a little bit of perspective, first of all, my friend was really saddened by this situation because here she was really wanting and needing to be in a loving, kind relationship with another partner who had this jealousy issue. And you know what? People are entitled to those feelings of their own. And she was stuck in a difficult, precarious situation that was really hard for her. And if I'm really honest about the energy exchange in this relationship, I think I was the more needy one in terms of time and attention, and that we had slowly been drawing back a little bit already, and that this was just another step in that drawback, if I'm honest with what it was. But it was really hard for me, and I definitely at that time didn't have the foresight or the ability to really look cleanly and clearly at when the bigger picture was happening on all sides. I just felt abandoned and left, and I was angry. When I gave myself some space and started doing this journey of soul recovery, this is one of the resentments that I went back and looked at, because with this friend, we were able to have some conversations to attempt to reconcile our friendship, not to go back to a best friend relationship, but she moved and actually moved across the country, found another partner that was a perfect partner for her, ended up getting married. And we reconciled our friendship, but it never had that same flavor and intimacy that it had had before. Are you ready to step into your soul recovery? Visit the website recoveryoursoul.net to learn more about the 9-step soul recovery process. I hope that you'll join us the first Monday of every month for the free soul recovery support group on Zoom, where we learn more about soul recovery and connect with each other. If you'd like to work directly with me to move through the 9-step soul recovery process, I'm here for you, but you can also choose to work the steps on your own with individual modules intended to support you to work at your own pace and on your own time. And if you want even more soul recovery, join us for the Recover Your Soul bonus podcast for Patreon members and Apple Podcast subscribers, where I interview amazing people sharing soul recovery tips for us and also do spiritual book studies. You can also find daily inspiration on Facebook and Instagram and join our private Facebook community. Visit the website for more information, links, and registration for everything. Back to the episode. I just want to take a quick break and invite you personally to join me in one of the upcoming soul recovery workshops or retreats. There's nothing more powerful than stepping into a sacred space with an open, supportive community where you can heal, grow, and reconnect with your authentic self. If you're ready to go deeper on your soul recovery journey, I'd love for you to work directly with me. The next virtual one-day soul recovery workshop is on Saturday, May 31st, live on Zoom. This is a wonderful way to immerse yourself in the 9-step soul recovery process from wherever you are. I hope that you will all join me with this. Or if you're looking for an in-person experience, join me for a 2-day retreat in either Lafayette, Colorado, July 19th and 20th, or in Asheville, North Carolina in September on the 13th and the 14th. Both retreats offer safe, nourishing environments to release those old patterns, gain new insights, and experience transformation, surrounded by like-minded souls on their soul recovery journey. You're invited to take this next step with me, and you can visit recoveryoursoul.net to learn more and save your spot. I can't wait to support you in this sacred space. Back to the episode. So what do I do when I'm looking at the resentment for myself? What I want to look at is I want to look underneath the rock, as I talk about. We're trying to control on the top. I want it to be a certain way. I don't like what she did to me. I'm going around telling people how upset I am, how she hurt me, what she did to me. I'm creating this continuous story. But when I went and looked underneath at myself, I recognized that she hit a button around abandonment that was very, very, very wounding around my dad. And that as a little girl, when my parents divorced when I was 8, that I really only would go see my dad maybe once a month, maybe twice a month at the most. And he always had some girlfriend, some new girlfriend, a different girlfriend, whatever the situation was. And as a little girl, I felt like I didn't ever have any time alone with my dad or have any attention alone with my dad. And that I really hadn't my entire life, because not that he didn't love me, because he did love me. And again, in soul recovery, we're really looking not at judgment at the other person, but we're looking at how it felt to me. So what it felt like to me was that he was always busy. He was always distracted. He was a musician. He was in a band. He was doing all of his things. And so then when I had this time with him, I knew that he loved me, but I was just fit into whatever his weekend was with whatever girlfriend he had at the time. And then when I was 13 years old, he met his soon-to-be second wife, and she said very poignantly that the relationship that I had with my dad didn't feel comfortable to her. And now I can see it from an entirely different perspective. But I was this little girl that was 13, and I still really wanted my dad's attention. So I liked to sit on his lap, and I liked to hold hands. And he lived in a one-bedroom apartment. And so when I would come to visit him, we would sleep in the same bed, which was totally normal and appropriate to me, but she didn't feel like that was appropriate. And so she basically set up boundaries and guidelines, or ultimatums that said, when Rachel's around, these are my expectations. You won't hold hands with her. She can't sit on your lap. You never sleep together again. You're not allowed to, I think, if I remember, and again, this could be my own mind, you're not allowed to kiss. You're not, like, whatever this touchy-feely way that I grew up with my parents was, she didn't feel what was appropriate. And so it went from like 100% of me being there on whatever my weekends were and whatever it was, to this instant cutoff. Well, that's how I felt in this situation with my friend, is that I was cut off. And so, of course, it hit this really deep wound for me to be abandoned, because it was reminding me of this abandonment that I had from my dad and how that had felt and how hard that had been at that particular time. And that is the wound. That abandonment wound from my dad is actually the same abandonment wound that got repeated in my life that set up these kinds of friendships that I had. So this thing about resentment that's so fascinating is actually, it's a way for you to see your own story. It's a way for you to understand how your mind works, this perceived feelings, these understandings of yourself. When I'm in competition with somebody, it's almost like I'm in reaction to that person, like my stepmother, who in my mind is the reason for my upset, for my abandonment. It took me a long time and a lot of soul recovery work to stop putting all my energy on my stepmother, who I did not have a great relationship with, who was complicated. And there were a lot of painful, difficult times in addition to some lovely times. But there was a lot of really difficult situations in those years that we were all together as a family on those weekends. But it took me a long time to actually realize I was mad at my dad. I wasn't actually mad at my stepmom as much as I was disappointed and sad at my dad that he hadn't stood up for me, that he hadn't chosen me. And when I look at it from that higher perspective that says, of course he didn't, because those relationships, those love relationships with a partner, adults need those and want those more. Just like my friend needed to choose this potential romantic relationship over her friendship with me, because that was appropriate and right to her soul's journey, what she needed. But as a little girl, I didn't know how to process those emotions yet. And what it created was that adversary that I need and want somebody else to blame, because that's easier than it is for me to look at my own stuff, my own insecurities. And if I look at almost all my resentments that I've had with friendships over the years that have either fallen apart slowly or had something more traumatic happen from them, they're all pushing the same value button. They're all pushing the same button that says, I'm not enough, I've done something wrong, that I'm unlovable, I'm not valued, I'll always be taken advantage of. These are real wounds. They're deep wounds. They're showing up to give us information for our own healing. They want to be healed. So how do we go about healing resentments? First, we have to acknowledge it. We have to stop just saying, oh, it's not important, or I'm over it, or we're too spiritual to have those kinds of feelings. If I think I'm too spiritual to have resentment, then I'm not being honest with myself. We can't let it go unless we see what it is. So one of the first things I always recommend, and you hear me say this time and time again, is go to the journaling. By writing it down, we are slowing our brain down enough to actually get it on paper, and we're stopping the loop. So in your journaling, ask yourself, what am I still holding on to that isn't serving me anymore? What am I holding on to that is continuing to harm me? Let your heart speak without censoring. And sometimes this is a really raw truth, but it's yours. And it's interesting how much we've actually tried to protect ourselves from what these deep core beliefs are. So we're looking for that belief. This is step 3 in soul recovery, which is we're looking for, what is my belief pattern or story? So what is it? So underneath the resentment might be one of mine's, not being valued, I'm always taken advantage of. The belief is your real core wound. And when you bring compassion to the wound, the resentment starts to dissolve. And then you can use meditation or visualization. And I love the meditations around really self-compassion. I think it's so important to look at our protectors and parts that I've talked about in previous episodes, that these resentments are really actually protectors trying to keep our wounded, tender selves safe. So if we give ourselves that compassion and that ability to really recognize that each of our feelings are acceptable, they're important, they're valuable, and to allow those stories of, for me, when I was a little girl, and those uncomfortable weekends and the difficult years with my stepmother, or the pain that little girl felt, instead of saying, oh, it's ridiculous that you felt that way, it's not that big of a deal, to actually feel those feelings in a space of meditation where I'm connected to my higher self, to something even greater still. To use sometimes visualization, such as cutting energetic cords, to allow myself to see that I want sometimes to hold on to those old storylines, to repeat it as if I'm a victim, as if something horrible happened, that if it had been different, then it would be different. Well, it happened. It is. But if I can look at what was in this space, in this meditative, sacred space, and see it for what it was, and give myself permission to feel the feelings that I felt, and then let go of the control, that belief that I could do something about it or it should have been different, it actually is energy that dissipates. And we're not erasing the past, but we're choosing to take your energy back. We're not letting those old stories be on a loop of what they did to me versus this is what happened. And, I recently had a conversation with my stepmother. This sort of going back to the story with my dad. She and my dad divorced when Alex was born, shortly after Alex was born. And when my dad divorced, I divorced too. So I wrote a letter that said that I didn't want contact. And so this is 28 years ago. And this was a time when no contact, I think, wasn't so popular or easy to understand. But I knew that it was going to be incredibly painful for her because I knew that she loved me. And I knew that she was excited to be a grandparent to my son. But the relationship between she and my dad had run its course and was its own situation. And for me to choose at that time to let go of that relationship and not have to continue something that didn't feel good to me was a pretty big deal at that time. And I had resentment for a while. I actually had some pretty major resentments for a while the stories that I told about, what she had done and how it had been. And like I said, as I did the work and really recognized so much of my own feelings around my own father stuff, which we all have mother-father wounds, my heart opened more and more and more over time. And so over these last 20-something years, there's been a couple moments and times of emails. She has a son who's the same age as me, who has a lot of mental health issues. And there's still been contact between my dad and my once stepbrother and my stepmother. A couple years ago, when I was going to be in Santa Fe, I scheduled to have coffee with her. And what was really interesting is that there was no energy left. There was no upset left in me at all. I had only compassion. And what it didn't mean is that didn't mean that I want to invite this person fully into my life again. I think that's the really important thing to understand, is that when we do this work, when you let go of resentment, it doesn't mean that you all of a sudden just let everything happen and come into you that was once harmful or hurtful. And it actually means that you don't let people walk all over you. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. You have to have boundaries. It's okay to say no. It's okay to walk away. And that sometimes can be the greatest gift in truly releasing the resentment, is to make that choice. So when I met back up with this woman, we didn't have a lot of deep conversations, but she did say that letter and the choice that you made was really harmful and hurtful to me. And I was able to say, I'm sorry for that. It does not mean that I'm sorry in the sense of I shouldn't have done it. It means from the depth of my heart, in my releasing of my own resentment, I can see that that was hurtful and harmful to her. And I truly am sad that that was the experience that she had. But I knew that it was the right choice for me. And if I look at all of these relationships that have all this sort of same energy around the resentments and the being harmed and hurt, it's this constant question of, can I choose myself? And how do I choose myself in these situations without all the blame and all of the upset and the somebody's at fault here, and switch it to, this is how I feel, this is what's going on for me, and to begin to even see what's going on for them. We learn that freedom comes from letting go, not from needing someone else to apologize or change, but it's the connection to yourself and your higher power. It's that observation that we are complicated, relationships are complicated, that I did feel hurt in all the times when someone pushed my value button or my not enough button. Of course it hurt. But I'm not going to continue the story that says, here's what they did to me. And just as an aside, what I think is interesting about friendships now is it gets complex when you start doing the spiritual work, because we generally sit around with people and discuss our resentments. We sit around and talk about how somebody else is at fault. It gets more and more, what's the word I'm trying to come up with? It gets more and more interesting to be with people where you can truly share how you feel, but a resentment isn't tied to it. Because how you feel is important. What is really going on with you is your opportunity to heal. That's why the resentment is a signpost, that if there's something that is tagging as a resentment, if you find yourself wanting to tell the story about that person who did something to you, it's actually giving you information about where you can be healed, parts of you that are still enlivened with pain. And that pain is something that is valuable to talk about. But when we talk about it from an empowered perspective, when we talk about it from our whole self, instead of from our wounded, attacked part of ourself, you're opening up to true depth of healing. And then you're allowed to have compassion for yourself, and you can offer compassion to the other. In each of these situations, I have so much tenderness now for each of these people, and I've only discussed a couple of the many, many friendship resentments that I've had over the years that have given me information about who I am, and to remind me that I am valuable, I am lovable, I am enough, that each of these situations wasn't actually pointing to my being faulted. It was me experiencing that for myself, and that I get to choose how I'm going to show up, how I'm going to see it. I invite you to notice where resentment might be continuing to linger in your life, not with the judgment, but with curiosity. Can you soften around it? Can you ask, what is this part of me what do I need here? What does this part of me need? And you don't have to carry this pain around forever. You can release it, and you can come back to yourself. And releasing it doesn't mean that you're saying that it didn't happen, or it wasn't difficult, or it wasn't hurtful. It means that you're going to stop reliving the story and pressing play on the loop. If you want to work with this, if you want to continue to understand more about this, I'm here for you. This is what our coaching is and soul recovery is, to work through the 9-step soul recovery process that uncovers some of these resentments and beliefs and pains. You can work the 9 steps on your own through modules on the website. This process of healing yourself through your connection to a higher power is always about letting go of the story. It's about recognizing that the story is giving you information, but you are not your pain. You do not have to live from your pain, and you do not have to live from resentment. You can indeed let go of what no longer serves you and be free. Until next time, namaste. Thank you for listening, and I hope that helps support your soul recovery process. Just a reminder that every Friday is the Recover Your Soul bonus podcast. This podcast is for Patreon members and Apple Podcast subscribers. And not only do you get an incredible interview or book study that comes with being part of that community, but your subscribing helps support this podcast and the Recover Your Soul community. If you want to listen to those bonus episodes but can't subscribe right now, do know that you can be a free Patreon member and have access for limited time to new episodes. Visit the website recoveryoursoul.net or check out the show links below for coupons and information for upcoming events. I thank you for sharing this podcast with your friends and family. I thank you for giving it 5 stars, and the reviews that are left bring tears to my eyes. I am honored to be part of your life. Together, we can do the work that will recover your soul. The Recover Your Soul podcast and its content is for educational purposes only and is not allied or representative of any organizations or religions. It's based on the opinions and experience of Reverend Rachel Harrison. Recover Your Soul claims no responsibility to any persons or entity for any liability, loss, damage, or cause alleged to be caused directly or indirectly as a result of its use. Applications or interpretations of the information represented herein. Take what you need and leave the rest.